When I first moved to DC fresh out of college, I was young, broke, and desperate to cut costs any way I could. Living alone was out of the question on my measly entry-level salary, so I turned to the magical land of Craigslist to find a roommate and split rent and bills. At first, I actually had decent luck finding roommates through Craigslist. They were usually also young professionals new to DC, and we amiably coexist in cramped apartments for a year or so before moving on. But that streak of good fortune ran out when I met Jessica through a roommate ad. The listing seemed normal enough. A girl around my age looking for someone to share a tiny one-bedroom apartment in Adams Morgan. Rent was dirt cheap, so I got excited and sent her a message right away. We exchanged a few emails, then planned to meet up for coffee so I could check her out in person before committing to anything. When we met up at a cafe near the apartment, Jessica seemed totally normal and friendly. She was around my age, had a stable office job, and we really hit it off chatting about our favorite Netflix shows, foods, interests. No red flags at all. Afterwards, we walked together to see the apartment, and I remember thinking, wow, Jessica seems so great, this is perfect. The unit itself was extremely small, with just a living room, tiny kitchenette, cramped bathroom, and one bedroom. Jessica suggested we split the bedroom by putting up a curtain down the middle. Not an ideal living situation, but hey, the rent was hundreds less than other places I'd seen. I was sold and eagerly agreed to move in and become Jessica's new roommate. The first 5 months living there were almost suspiciously uneventful. Jessica and I politely avoided each other in the cramped bedroom, occasionally exchanging brief small talk about our days in the living room. But mostly we just did our own thing. Ships passing in the night. After half a year of smooth sailing, the wind suddenly changed course. I got an amazing new job offer with a salary bump so big I couldn't turn it down. The only catch was I had to move to the other side of DC. I gently broke the news to Jessica and said I'd need to move out within 30 days. She seemed genuinely disappointed to lose me as a roommate, but was very gracious and understanding about the situation. Jessica even offered to immediately start looking for a replacement, so I wouldn't have to keep paying rent at a place I didn't live anymore. I was touched by the thoughtful gesture and felt relieved to part on such good terms. On my moving day, Jessica had me sign some official roommate release form she'd found online, stating I was no longer a leaseholder or financially responsible for the apartment going forward. I figured this firmly severed any remaining ties between us. I happily moved into my new place thinking things had ended amicably. But oh, how wrong I was. Out of the blue, about 6 months later, Jessica started texting and calling me incessantly asking for money. Turns out she never actually found a replacement roommate like she said she would. Jessica just stayed living alone in that tiny one bedroom the whole time. And now the unpaid back rent and bills had piled up to almost $8,000, which she seemed to think I was liable for. I gently explained there was obviously no way I'd give her money for an apartment I hadn't lived in for half a year. But Jessica insisted that because I was on the original lease, I was still on the hook. She just would not stop calling and texting me daily, hounding me over and over about this supposed unpaid rent debt. At first, I tried to reason with her logically and appeal to her empathy, but it became clear Jessica was totally unreasonable. After weeks of harassment, I finally had to block her number entirely, but she still found ways to contact me, blowing up my social media, showing up at my workplace. I was flabbergasted at how this seemingly normal, well-adjusted person had turned into a complete psycho. The rent money obsession consumed her every waking moment. When Jessica started buzzing my new apartment intercom at 4 a.m., I knew I had to take more drastic measures. I went to my lawyer buddy who helped me file a restraining order right away. I brought along the roommate release form Jessica had me sign when I moved out. After reviewing it, my lawyer assured me I had done everything 100% legally and was not on the hook for a set of rent or bills from the old apartment. Thank God for that roommate release form. This whole debacle taught me some hard lessons about covering your ass when you shack up with near strangers as a young, broke city dweller. Even someone who seems totally sane and stable at first can morph into a monster. Don't make the mistakes I did. Think ahead and have an exit strategy ready. Get any agreements or responsibilities signed in writing, save pertinent emails and texts, document everything you can. You might think you're being overly cautious, but it really pays off down the road if things go south. Never underestimate the value of simple legal documents like a roommate release form. That piece of paper saved my ass big time. So fellow broke 20-somethings searching for roommates, heed my tale of woe. There are great people to connect with on Craigslist, but there are also Jessicas lurking, waiting to pounce. Enter any shared living situation smartly, cover your bases, and leave yourself an out if you need to flee. A little paranoia and paperwork can prevent huge hassles and financial drama. Consider yourself warned. Looking back, I still get chills thinking about the bizarre identity theft ordeal I somehow got caught up in last year. It all started out as a pretty uneventful Tuesday morning. I had just poured my usual cup of coffee and was scrolling through my phone when suddenly there was this thunderous banging on my front door. My pulse immediately started racing as I rushed to see what was happening. Peering cautiously through the peephole, I was met by the menacing glare of a heavily tattooed stranger demanding I open up. As soon as I cracked the door, he shoved his way inside, hitting right in my face. He kept yelling about wanting the dirt bike he had paid for on Craigslist. I stood there stunned, insisting I had no idea what he was talking about, but he refused to believe me, shoving his phone in my face to show me some Craigslist ad using my name and address selling a dirt bike. I stared at it in disbelief, my mind racing to make sense of what was happening. It slowly started to dawn on me that someone must have stolen my identity and was now using it to run some kind of scam. Before I could even fully process everything, the guy got more aggressive, threatening me if I didn't produce this motorcycle. I desperately tried explaining I was a victim in this too, but he didn't care. After cursing me out, he finally left, slamming my front door hard behind him. I stood there shaken, panicked over who would have done this and why me. But I didn't have much time to think about it before there was another furious pounding at my door just a few hours later. This time it was a different angry stranger claiming he had bought expensive electronics off a fake ad using my name. What followed over the next week was a bizarre series of tense encounters with strangers showing up at my door. They were all expecting to collect various expensive items listed on fraudulent Craigslist ads: gaming systems, luxury clothes, stand-up paddleboards. No matter how many times I frantically tried to explain it was an identity theft scheme, few people believed me. Some even threatened to get violent if I didn't turn over what they had already paid for. I felt so violated knowing some criminal had hijacked my identity and good name just to rip people off. I desperately tried removing the fake ads and filed police reports, but nothing seemed to deter this scammer. New scam listings kept popping up daily under my name. Feeling exposed, I temporarily stayed with a friend across town, hoping to deter more confrontations. But when I returned home a week later, I found a fresh round of bogus ads posted under my name. It became clear I was being closely watched by some unseen cyber criminal getting a sick thrill out of harassing me. Were they surveilling me somehow, taking pleasure in this twisted game? Or was it just an opportunistic crook who happened to sell on me? The chilling ordeal left me constantly looking over my shoulder, feeling violated but unsure how to make it stop. I managed to diffuse each volatile encounter, escaping physically unharmed, but I worried what would happen if someone just snapped. In the end, the whole nightmare experience left me forever changed. Where I once saw Craigslist as a handy online marketplace, I now viewed it as a dangerous haven for predators hiding behind anonymity. I became much more cautious and skeptical, no longer so quick to trust. I agonized over feeling so powerless to protect myself that first time it happened, and I constantly worried it could easily happen again no matter what precautions I took. As unsettling as it all was, I tried to focus on just being grateful things never escalated to real violence during those heated confrontations at my door. Going forward, guarding my identity became a top priority. I hoped whoever had fixated on me would just move on to someone else. But an uneasy feeling told me I might never feel totally safe again after being so hauntingly exposed to the dark elements that lurk online. My only option was to remain vigilant, learn from the experience, and try to wrest back some control. Though even that felt like wishful thinking after becoming the unaware victim of a faceless cybercriminal prowling Craigslist. My one certainty was that I'd never look at the world in quite the same way again after surviving that chilling brush with identity theft. In the weeks after, I found myself obsessing over how it could have happened in the first place. I ran virus scans, changed passwords, froze credit reports. But there were no obvious security breaches on my end. So how did this thief get a hold of my personal information to impersonate me so extensively online? I racked my brain trying to retrace my steps over the past year. Had I left sensitive documents in the trash or given out info carelessly? Could it have been an old data breach I wasn't aware of? The not knowing haunted me almost as much as the bizarre encounters at my door. I felt like I was being toyed with by some unseen adversary who had infiltrated my digital life. I decided to invest in a home security system, hoping cameras might deter another ambush. I also took the drastic measure of shutting down my social media accounts, worried they could reveal personal details. Of course, I knew I couldn't completely unplug from the online world, but I quickly became hyper-aware of how much sensitive information we freely hand over in daily digital transactions. Even just signing up for an account or making an online purchase means entrusting companies with your data, and we can never fully know how secure that data is on their end. So beyond taking my own precautions, I started seeing the limits of what any one person can do to protect themselves online. Hacking and identity theft are now big business, with individual data treated like a commodity, and laws haven't kept up with the pace of technology. I contacted the major credit bureaus to officially freeze my files, but the process was cumbersome, and law enforcement seemed limited in what they could do beyond taking a report. I also tried contacting Craigslist to have the fake ads removed faster, but never got a direct response. I realized these big platforms have little accountability over how they're used for scams, and victims are left to fend for themselves. The more I learned about identity theft, the more I saw systemic gaps that make ordinary people vulnerable, and how relatively little recourse there was once your personal information was compromised. I kept hitting dead ends trying to pinpoint the root cause of what happened to me. Gradually, the strange encounters died down as the scammer presumably moved on to other targets. The intense paranoia I initially felt subsided over the coming months. And thankfully, I didn't have any more angry strangers show up at my door, but let's just say I will need to look closely at my personal security from now on. I still remember this awful Craigslist experience when I was fresh out of college. I was bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and completely clueless. I had some unpaid internship that gave me a tiny stipend each month, like $1,500, which I thought would go so far in the Big Apple. Spoiler alert, it didn't. Anyway, I was staying at this grungy hostel in Williamsburg while frantically searching for an apartment. The walls were paper thin, and I got to hear my neighbors going at it every night. Not an ideal living situation when you're trying to start a new life and career. So when I saw the Craigslist ad for a $800/month one-bedroom in Hell's Kitchen, I jumped on it. The location was perfect, right between Times Square and the row of lively gay bars on 9th Avenue, and only a few blocks from my internship office. I was young and desperate, so I ignored all warning signs. That price should have been the first red flag. I mean, $800 for your own place in a dormant building in that neighborhood. In hindsight, too good to be true, but I was silly and eager to get out of that hostel. I eagerly met the landlord one evening after work. Oh boy, was he a character. Your typical old-school New Yorker with an accent so thick I could barely understand him half the time. Coke bottle glasses made his eyes bug out, and he blinked real hard in threes. Just this weird, mole-like little man. He had food stains covering his shirt and these cargo shorts that went past his knees. Looked like he hadn't shaved his legs. Ever. Not judging, just painting a picture here. Anyway, he welcomed me into the apartment, which was jam-packed with crap. And I don't just mean cluttered. I'm talking piles of newspapers, old furniture, random tchotchkes. Like a hoarder's paradise. That wasn't even the sketchiest part. He told me he'd still be living there, on the couch. Said he didn't work and just sat around smoking weed all day. In hindsight, I should have ran right then and there. But I couldn't pass up the convenient location and huge bedroom. The rent was all-inclusive, even the window AC unit. And I figured the guy seemed harmless enough. Just an eccentric, older loner type. So I moved in a few days later with just a suitcase to my name. That first night, I legit thought I might get murdered in my sleep. I even pushed the dresser in front of the bedroom door to feel safer, like I was starring in my own horror movie. Luckily, we slowly became sort of friends over the next few months. I'd chat with him on my way in and out of the apartment. He'd offer me hits from his bowl, and I'd politely decline. Hey, I was trying to make nice with a guy. But man, was that dude a real character. He was convinced he had invented Wi-Fi and that the big tech companies had stolen his idea. Said he should be rich for coming up with it. He also claimed he had this chummy relationship with the Twitter execs even though they didn't know he existed. He'd tweet angry rants at them, but of course never got a response. Oh, and he had all these prescription pill bottles lying around that he said were from his psychiatrist, but he preferred self-medicating with weed instead. Just a real paranoid, delusional dude. I lived there for 4 months until I finally got out of that nuke house. Found another apartment with a buddy and Bed-Stuy that I could actually afford by waiting tables at night. Haven't talked to the Craigslist guy since, except when he randomly accused me of stealing a book he gave me. Said he was gonna take me to small claims court over a paperback that cost like $5. I just ignored him after that. Looking back, I can't believe I survived those 4 months in that apartment. I must have been truly desperate and stupid to put up with that living situation. But in a weird way, I wear my time there as a badge of honor. Surviving that place proved I could make it anywhere in NYC. If I could handle daily life with that wackadoodle stoner, I could handle a hustle and bustle of the big city. Craigslist roulette, it builds character, but I don't recommend it. There's a fine line between getting a good deal and moving in with a complete psycho. I somehow emerged unscathed, but that was just sheer dumb luck. Now when I see ads that seem too good to be true, I don't even bother reaching out. Not worth the risk or headache, even if rent is stupid expensive here. I'd rather split a tiny apartment with roommates than take a chance on some sketchy subletter situation again. In the end, it all worked out okay for me. That brief stint in the Hell's Kitchen hoarder house gave me some wild stories to tell at parties, and it taught me to trust my gut when something feels off. I survived my trial by fire in NYC, 4 months with that freak show of a Craigslist landlord. Now I can handle just about anything this city throws my way. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? Man, looking back now, I still get chills thinking about that whole crazy situation with the Craigslist creeper. It all started so normally. I was home from college for summer break and wanted to make a little extra spending money. I had this old lamp from my grandma's attic, a bike I never used, some vintage teas, just random stuff taking up space that I didn't need anymore. Figured I could sell it quick on Craigslist and pocket some easy cash. So one afternoon I threw up an ad with pics of the stuff. The cute retro lamp with the rose-patterned shade, my dusty purple Schwinn that had sat unused in the garage for years, and some classic rock t-shirts I had picked up at vintage shops but never actually wore. I listed the price at $25 for everything together. It wasn't much, but hey, $25 is $25. The very next day, I get an email from some guy named Todd saying he'll take it all. Right off the bat, he didn't even try to negotiate or haggle me down on the price, which I actually thought was a nice change from the usual Craigslist jackasses who always try to talk you down. Todd's email was very short and to the point. Just said he'd like to purchase the items listed for $25. We exchanged a couple more quick emails to set up a time for him to swing by my house and pick up the stuff. He said he could come by around 3 p.m. the next day, which worked for me. I gave him my address and reminded him that the total was $25, just to be clear. He replied with a simple, see you then." When 3 p.m. rolled around the next day, I'll admit I was feeling a little nervous. Meeting strangers from the internet to sell stuff always puts me a bit on edge. But I tried to shake it off. It was broad daylight, and I'd be inside my house the whole time. What could go wrong? I peered out the front window and I heard a car pull up outside. A nondescript set in white or silver, pretty generic looking. A guy who I assumed must be Todd got out of the driver's side and made his way up my front walkway. Average height and build, dressed in plain jeans and a t-shirt. Nothing alarming or conspicuous so far. But when I answered the door, I instantly got weird vibes from him. His eyes were so cold and lifeless, and his facial expressions were strangely flat. His movements almost seemed robotic in a way as he walked inside, and I led him toward the living room. Still, I tried to brush the uneasy feelings aside and stay polite. "Hi, I'm Claire. You must be Todd," I said, extending my hand. Yes, he gave my hand a limp, clammy shake and just kept staring blankly. Definitely awkward, but I powered through. "Great, well, the items are right over here." I gestured to the corner where I had neatly placed the lamp, bike, and folded t-shirts. Todd barely glanced at them before wordlessly whipping out this huge wad of cash from his pocket. Way more than $25. This enough? He asked in this flat, creepy monotone. I quickly counted the bills, $50 for stuff I listed at $25. I definitely wasn't about to argue, though, so I just said, yeah, that's fine. Todd gathered up the lamp, bike, and shirts without another word, but as he turned to leave, he suddenly looked back at me and blurted out, "Let me take you to dinner tonight." I was so stunned I didn't even know how to respond at first. This bizarre dude I'd met all of 10 minutes ago was asking me out. I'm not gonna lie, I was completely freaked. Every instinct in my body was screaming that something was not right with this guy. "Oh, that's okay. You really don't need to do that," I stammered, taken aback. "I'm pretty busy tonight anyway." "Are you sure? I'd like to get to know you better." As a thank you, Todd persisted in that spine-chilling monotone. "No, really, I'm good." "Enjoyed the stuff, though," I said as I ushered him out the front door and literally locked it behind him. I was so relieved to see him go. Or so I thought. The very next day, I stopped at my usual cafe downtown to grab a coffee on the way to run some errands. As I added Korean sugar to my drink, I casually glanced across the street and felt my blood instantly run cold. There was Todd, standing on the opposite sidewalk, just watching me. We made direct eye contact, and he flashed this chilling grin. Then he pulled out his phone, and it was like he was taking pictures of me. I froze in shock for a second before bolting back into the safety of the cafe. My hands shook as I whipped out my own phone to call my best friend. "Kara, oh my God, that Craigslist guy from yesterday is stalking me," I whispered urgently. "He's right outside the cafe." I quickly explained the creepy encounter to Kara, who was as freaked as I was. She told me to stay put while she came to pick me up. I hunkered down at a back table, nervous to even look outside again. What if he was still there? How did he notify me at the cafe? This random stranger now knew my exact address and my usual hangouts. I shuddered thinking about those cold, dead eyes watching me. When Kara pulled up 10 minutes later, I ran out and jumped in her car. I turned to look for Todd as we squealed away. And there he was across the street still, now frowning as his prey escaped. Kara and I decided we should go straight to the police. Over the next week, the Todd sightings continued, each more unnerving than the last. He started turning up everywhere I went, lurking near the yoga studio when I left class, appearing at the far end of the grocery aisles, pumping gas one stall over for me late at night. That eerie blank stare tracking my every move, snapping secret photos of me when he thought I wasn't looking. I tried varying my routes and routines. Didn't matter. Dude kept finding me. At the mall, a friend's apartment, salon parking lot. I never knew where he'd materialize next. Then one night I'm home alone, curtain drawn as I sit watching TV. Out of nowhere, I hear this weird scraping against the back door. Heart seizing in my chest, I tiptoe over and peer out the blinds. There stands Todd, clawing his nails along the glass with this sick grin on his face. Beyond terrified, I immediately call 911 with shaking hands while the maniac continues baiting and yelling my name. Within minutes, cops show up and arrest him for stalking. I later learned he had a long criminal history and serious mental health issues. I had to file a restraining order against Todd. For months, I lived in fear, jumping at every little sound, constantly peering over my shoulder wherever I went, convinced I'd see those vacant eyes staring back at me. I quit using Craigslist entirely after that traumatic ordeal. Scoring a PS5 had become my obsession ever since the new console was announced last year. No matter how hard I tried, the thing was impossible to find anywhere in stores or online in the months after launch. Scalpers were buying up all stock instantly just to flip them on eBay for double the price. Even entering dozens of online lottery drawings and camping out for all-night drops, my luck utterly failed me each time. So when I came across a Craigslist ad from some woman practically giving away her PS5 for cheap, I got way too excited. Every ounce of common sense flew out the window in my zeal to finally get my hands on this super rare console. I immediately messaged the seller without even considering it could be a scam. We agreed to meet that same day in a sketchy underground parking garage downtown to do the exchange. Shady location for sure, but my judgment was too clouded by PS5 fever to care. I convinced my overly cautious mom to tag along just in case things went south. She reluctantly agreed, mostly so she could say, "I told you so," later if it all blew up in my face. Approaching the dingy parking garage entrance ramp already felt eerie, like the opening scene of a crime drama. The structure appeared half abandoned, with trash and broken glass strewn about the pavement leading down. Graffiti covered the walls from top to bottom. I started having serious doubts about meeting some random Craigslist person here, but tried to shrug them off. The temptation of scoring a PS5 at long last was just too powerful. My sense of unease only grew stronger as we descended into the garage's dimly lit basement level. Flickering neon lights and oil-stained concrete created an ominous atmosphere straight out of a horror movie. Then a filthy old sedan emerged from the dark shadows in the corner. It pulled up and parked across from us in the furthest spot possible. I felt my mom's whole body tense up next to me, ready to bolt back upstairs to safety. But I convinced her to wait just a little longer. After a few painfully long minutes of silence, a sketchy-looking guy finally stepped out of the idling car. He was wearing a black hoodie pulled up over his head and ripped jeans. Every instinct I had screamed that this was a scam about to happen, but I forced myself to stand my ground. I had to at least try to get some confirmation this was a real PS5 before handing over a huge wad of cash. I asked the shady man to show me the console first. Without saying a word, he silently popped open the trunk to reveal a sealed Sony box that certainly looked legit. Throwing all caution to the wind, I eagerly counted out the $550 sale price in 20s and held it out. But right before I could grab the box, he slammed the trunk shut, jumped back into the still-running car, and sped away screeching the tires. I stood there stunned, realization gradually dawning that I just got ripped off big time. My mom instantly launched into an "I told you so" rant, scolding me for being so reckless meeting random people off the internet, especially in a creepy abandoned parking garage like this. I brushed off her criticism, too caught up in my own anger at letting this scumbag successfully pull one over on me. But she did manage to snap a picture of his license plate as he tore out of there. It wasn't much, but it was our only real clue. I filed a police report right away, but the bored cop taking my statement didn't seem too optimistic about tracking the guy down from just a license plate. He warned me that Craigslist scams were rampant and rarely solved. My heart sank as it started to sink in that I might never catch this crook or see that $550 again. I spent hours scouring Facebook and Craigslist itself, hoping to find any trace of the thief buried somewhere online. But my diligent searching didn't turn up anything useful. Right as I was about to give up, I stumbled onto a local Facebook group dedicated to exposing scammers in the area. I recounted my whole experience meeting a shady Craigslist guy and asked if anyone recognized him. To my surprise, several people in the group knew exactly who I was talking about. They identified him as a serial scammer they had encountered themselves on Craigslist over the years. A couple of the members even tracked down his real name and Facebook profile based on my car and license plate description. Armed with this wealth of new identifying information, I immediately called up the police again to update my report. The detective seemed far more interested this time around, saying the suspect already had several existing warrants out for fraud. He assured me they would make this a high-priority case now with such solid leads. Finally, after a few more weeks of waiting, I got the call I had been hoping for. They caught him. Thanks to some great detective work by the Facebook group combined with serious police effort, they were able to track the scammer down to his apartment. He tried to slip away through a rear entrance when he spotted the approaching cops, but they caught him before he could flee the building. Recovering my $550 still seemed doubtful, but at least he was off the streets and unable to prey on other desperate people online. Some good old-fashioned internet sleuthing combined with police tenacity took down another criminal tearing through my city. The whole story ended up making the evening news that night as a warning to others about meeting strangers off the internet. My proud mom finally got her chance to deliver an "I told you so" on camera. I had definitely learned my lesson about letting greed and desperation override common sense when pursuing hot-ticket items online. Never again would I put myself or my money in such a risky situation, no matter how badly I might want something. The hunt would continue for a PS5, but only through reputable stores and sites, and I would never again let the tempting allure of deals from total strangers on the internet cause me to abandon all reason when it came to meeting them in real life. This experience taught me to keep my wits and trust my gut, not my obsession over having the latest gear. No product is worth getting scammed or putting yourself in danger. I was eager to move into my first apartment after college. The freedom of having my own place without roommates was exhilarating. That excitement quickly faded, however, when I did a walkthrough and saw the disgusting condition of the carpets. Years of stains and ground-in dirt from who knows what covered the dingy beige carpeting throughout the living room, hallway, and both bedrooms. Mysterious sticky spots made the carpets crunch underfoot. I could even smell the embedded odor if I got close enough. There was no way I could live with the carpets looking and reeking like that. As a recent grad, money was extremely tight. I browsed Craigslist searching for an affordable carpet cleaner or installer. Most were out of my budget, but I eventually found a post from a guy offering installations for dirt cheap. He didn't list a company name, just his first name, Mike, and a phone number. The ad was very sparse, no reviews or pictures or details, but the price made it enticing. We emailed back and forth. He seemed friendly and knowledgeable enough, answering all my questions about types of carpets and installation methods. This was my first time hiring anyone off Craigslist, but the deal felt too good to pass up. No one else could touch his price. On installation day, Mike arrived in an unmarked white van with big rolls of brand new carpeting piled up inside. He got straight to work ripping up the stained carpets in the living room first. I kept out of his way in the kitchen, letting him focus. About 2 hours later, I decided to check his progress. I was stunned by what I saw. While the new carpet was laid down, the seams were uneven and obvious. The edges were left unsecured and loose. Around the corners, the fit was sloppy and baggy. This was clearly amateur work. I gently brought up my concerns, hoping we could have a reasonable discussion about getting the carpets installed properly. But Mike immediately exploded, face reddening, as he shouted about how I didn't know shit about installing carpets. Taken aback, I tried to explain I just wanted to make sure the job was done right. But he got increasingly irate, spitting and cursing while insisting he knew what he was doing. Before I could calm him down, Mike stormed outside and flung open the back doors of his van. He rushed back in clutching a huge machete-style knife in his clenched fist. Now in a full rage, he waved the massive blade around while spitting threats about finishing the job however he wanted. Blood drained from my face, and I froze in shock before stumbling backwards towards the only interior room with a lock, the bathroom. I quickly shut myself in and locked the door with trembling hands. Huddled on the floor, I fished my phone out and whispered to the 911 operator, explaining the violent intruder in my home. Body shaking, I listened to Mike stomping around and shouting violent threats. His enraged shouting was muffled through the door, but I could make out crunching footsteps, slamming furniture, and plenty of bombs and promises related to the giant knife. It felt like hours ticked by as I waited in paralyzing fear for police to arrive. Finally, the sounds of sirens cut through the air. Mike shouted angrily at the cops at first, but after a minute it went quiet. An officer knocked on the bathroom door to let me know the house was secure. I slowly unlocked the door and emerged to speak with them, catching a glimpse of Mike's van peeling out down the street. The police took my statement and said to call him immediately if Mike returned. After they left, I did a quick walkthrough of the house. My stomach dropped when I noticed my keys, including the new house key, missing from the counter. That raging lunatic had swiped them on his way out and now had unlimited access to my home. As soon as the police left, I called a locksmith who rushed over to replace all the locks. It cost me an entire paycheck, but felt necessary after witnessing how violently unhinged Mike was. Who knew what you might do with a copy key or if you would return to break in and attack me? Now here I am, out a ton of money, home vulnerable with half-finished carpets ripped up, and paranoid that a vengeful psycho could come back any time. My attempt to save money by using Craigslist completely backfired in the worst possible way. This experience taught me to only hire legitimate professionals, even if it's financially difficult. The risk of going with a random Craigslist stranger simply isn't worth it, as I learned firsthand. I used to judge cautious people as paranoid, but after this trauma, my perspective has forever changed. I'll gladly pay more in the future for the peace of mind that comes with hiring a real company. Hopefully, as time passes, the vivid memories of this horrific incident will fade. But I doubt I'll ever feel totally secure in my own home knowing that a violent and unstable man once invaded and still has access. I ignored obvious red flags all to save a few bucks, and that decision could end up costing me much more in the end. This chilling Craigslist encounter will stick with me forever as a harsh lesson about the grim dangers lurking within its digital pages. I was in a pretty dark place after losing my job. The bills were piling up and my savings were drying up fast. The pressure was on to find work immediately or I could end up homeless. I was scouring the job sites day and night applying to anything I was even remotely qualified for. But it was a tough market with not nearly enough openings. Each day that passed without a single call back, I sank deeper into depression. I started doubting myself and wondering if I'd ever get hired again. The financial stress was crushing. I found myself crying at random times just thinking about how badly I had failed and how scary the future looked. In desperation, I turned to Craigslist job postings despite having always assumed it was just scams on there. But I was willing to try anything. One day, a listing caught my eye for an operations manager role paying $80, $120. I was shocked. That salary range was more than I'd ever made. The company name was Smith & White, which sounded reputable. I read through the job description carefully. They wanted someone with at least 5 years of management experience in a manufacturing plant or warehouse operation. I happened to have 7 years experience in that exact role at my last company. The list of responsibilities all matched up with things I had done. They were looking for knowledge of OSHA regulations, lean practices, inventory management software, etc. All boxes I could check off. This was a perfect fit on paper. It seemed almost too good to be true for a posting on Craigslist. I kept inspecting it for any red flags of a scam, but found none. They wanted resumes sent to an email address at the company domain. The job location was a major city near me. I started fantasizing excitedly about how quick my money troubles could be over if I landed this gig. Against my better judgment, I brushed aside any doubts and applied right away. The next day, I was stunned to actually get a call back from a woman named Linda saying she was a recruiter for Smith & White. She gushed about how impressive my background was and how I seemed ideally qualified for the role. She said she wanted to arrange an in-person interview immediately. I could hardly believe this was happening. Linda seemed totally legitimate on the phone, asking me insightful questions about my work history. We scheduled the interview for the very next day. She told me it would be at their corporate headquarters in downtown San Diego and gave me an office suite number and floor. I did a quick search and found there was indeed a large office building at that address. This was really going to happen. I showed up the next day in my best interview suit, portfolio in hand. I tried to project total confidence, though honestly my nerves were rattled. The enormous office tower loomed above me as I walked into the pristine lobby. Marble floors, attractive people in business wear coming and going. It reeked of corporate wealth. I told the receptionist I was there to see Linda for a Smith & White interview. She checked their directory and said there was no company by that name in the building. Taken aback, I wondered if I had written down the wrong suite number. I pulled out the info and showed her, but she said that floor was vacant. There was no Linda or Smith & White here. Uneasy confusion washed over me. I rode up to the floor anyway just to check. Stepping out of the elevator, I found a dim, empty space with bare walls and carpet. Not a single office or even cubicle divider could be seen. It was completely vacant and silent, not a soul around. My heart sank as I walked the floor, searching vainly for any sign of occupancy. But there was absolutely no trace of the company. Even the placards next to the elevator showed that floor as available space. How could this be? Had I really gotten the address wrong somehow? Going back down shaken, I asked the janitor wiping the lobby windows if he had ever seen or heard of a Smith & White located here. He told me no, this building had been his work home for 12 years and there had never been a company by that name here. Leaving the building, I felt totally disoriented and fearful about what was going on. I sat in my car Googling Smith & White frantically, but no website, address, or phone number came up anywhere for them.